Three, two, one, here we go. RAINMAN'S Take podcast. Observations on the world we live in. My take on current events and other topics of interest. Also interviews with some really cool people. So let's get the conversation going. Hey everybody, it's the Rain Man with another great episode for you. My guest today is Bill Holstein. Bill, how you doing?
Doing well, thank you.
Perfect. Well, listen, thanks again for joining me. Before we get into this, if you're a part of the RAINMAN'S Take community, thank you very much. If you're new to the show, welcome. I know you're going to love the content. So if you could go ahead and hit that subscribe button in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, and also watch this to the end, watch this video to the end. That's going to help me with the YouTube algorithm, which will help get the word out and continue the conversation going. With that being said, most of you will recall that I had in about a year and a half ago, I had Bill and a gentleman named Mike McLaughlin on. They were discussing a book they had recently written called Battlefield Cyber, How China and Russia Are Undermining Our Democracy and National Security. And obviously, cybersecurity, the whole cyber threat is front and center in today's world. And so I wanted to have Bill back on to just kind of get caught up with how things are going since that book came out and just kind of take it from there. But as a quick refresher, Bill is an author, journalist, consultant, and speaker. He has spent decades crisscrossing the United States and the world to understand who's winning and who's losing in the global economy. He's the author of several books. And again, the one that we discussed about a year and a half ago is called Battlefield Cyber. So Bill, thanks again for joining me. Why don't we go ahead and just kind of start off and just give me a little bit of an idea of what you've been up to for the last year and a half since we last spoke.
Well, I've been talking a lot about what I see happening and trying to not just sell books, but trying to sound the alarm that the things we wrote about in the book are happening, that 9 of our telecommunications companies, for example, have been penetrated by the Chinese for years now. And there have been big meetings in the White House about that with the top executives of the telecommunications companies, but they can't seem to find the Chinese because these systems they've built up over the decades, they never dreamed they would have to protect them from foreign adversaries. So they're inherently vulnerable. We've seen that the Chinese are into Microsoft email systems and have been able to penetrate the emails of the State Department, Commerce Department, Treasury Department. I mean, that's incredible that our government agencies now are vulnerable to Chinese surveillance at some levels. We don't know how far up the chain they went, but they certainly got some access. We know that the government has told us that our critical infrastructure, has been penetrated by malware placed by China and Russia, and we can't find it. So the critical infrastructure, of course, includes transportation, air, water, electricity, finance. These are all things that are owned and managed by the private sector. But as time has evolved, we've discovered that if our private sector cannot maintain the security of their assets, that we don't have anything near the kind of national security we want, because we're like Swiss cheese. We're full of holes. So the problem has only been magnified since our book came out, and I've been trying to be a voice of sanity, of reason.
Well, and we'll get into all that, whether you think it's because we just don't care or the Chinese have better technology. We'll get into all that. You wrote an article, and it's on your website, which is williamjholstein.com. And you wrote an article in December, and the title of it was Tom Friedman and the New York Times editorial page continue to daydream when it comes to China. And basically what I got from that is it doesn't seem like anybody is really taking this situation seriously. Can you talk a little bit about why you wrote that article, and is that kind of accurate, what I just said?
Yeah. Though there's been a sort of a civil war or a schism at the New York Times about China. On the front page, people like David Sanger are writing stories about how the Chinese are using AI to generate fake social media posts One of them was after the fires on Maui that they positioned a post in the Hawaiian social media landscape suggesting that the fires were caused by a U.S. government weather weapon. So that's clear disinformation. So the New York Times editorial page, though, has taken a view that we shouldn't be worried about China. They've written articles about how pandas can save the relationship. They've written articles by opera stars who've gone to China and sang to the Chinese and said, "Oh, what lovely people." So the New York Times editorial page, for some reason, is committed to this. As I say, whistling as they walk past the graveyard. I'll read you just a little bit what Tom Friedman said. He went there for a week and positioned himself as an expert. So he notes that there's more and more disorder going on in the world, more and more failing states. And only the United States and China working together with the IMF and World Bank will have the resources, power, and influence to stem some of this disorder. Well, first of all, China doesn't respect the IMF or World Bank. They see that as part of the American post-World War II world order. They want to subvert those institutions and replace them with their own mechanisms that serve their own interests. So here Tom Friedman is saying, I mean, this is like 20 years old, that he thinks we can cooperate with the Chinese at the World Bank and IMF. And so he told his Chinese interlocutors, why are you hanging around with losers like Vladimir Putin's Russia and Iran? How could you? And so, well, the reason, Tom, is that the Chinese are allies with Russia and Iran in attempting to subvert the American world order. And so the Chinese are active participants in trying to tear down democracies and create conflict in the Middle East and in Ukraine that saps the resources of the West and causes us to lose confidence in our leadership. So China and Russia and Iran, with a little help from North Korea, are engaged in a global campaign to undermine American power in the world. They don't want to cooperate. They want to undermine. And so this has been crystal clear since Xi Jinping went to Moscow in 2023 as part of his brotherly romance with Vladimir Putin. And on the way out the door at the airport, on tape, on camera, Xi said to Putin, "What we're trying to accomplish hasn't been achieved in 100 years." Well, so not many Americans understand what that's all about, but what he was referring to, if you have a sense of history, he's referring to the destruction of the Qing dynasty, the destruction of the czars in Russia, then World War II, and that resulted in the collapse of the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Ottoman Empire. So in other words, roughly 100 years ago, the established world order as we knew it, I wasn't around, but as people then knew it, collapsed. And so that's the goal that Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping have in common. And so for someone like Tom Friedman to go to China and pretend that we can be all kissy, all lovey, all huggy, it just just blows my mind, frankly.
Yeah, it's got that Chamberlain vibe when he came back from Germany before World War II and said that Hitler had no plans. So, I mean, is it as nefarious as he's being paid by the Chinese, or is it he just doesn't understand what's going on?
No, not at all. I mean, I think that the New York Times editorial page has been a leading voice for diversity, pluralism, call it what you will. And I think that they're concerned that if we understand the depth of the Chinese challenge coming from Beijing, that it will result in a backlash against the Chinese American community. And we as Americans believe that people from around the world can come here and become part of our system. And there are 5 million Chinese Americans or Chinese living in the United States. And so I think that that's the subtext. They're worried about another incarceration of Japanese as it happened during World War II. I think that they're trying to protect an ethnicity. And now I agree. We should not have a pogrom. We should not have mass incarceration, but we need to recognize that the Chinese government is, in fact, taking advantage of some members of the Chinese American diaspora, particularly if they have relatives back in China, to penetrate politically at the state, local government level, and at the federal level, and also to penetrate into our universities and our learning institutions and into our companies. So I can cite chapter and verse about how they do that. So I think that's what the New York Times is concerned about, is that if we start highlighting how the Chinese government is manipulating the Chinese Americans, that will have bad outcomes. The Chinese government is very cynical about this. They're operating secret police stations in around the world to surveil the overseas Chinese population. They play real rough with people they want to help them. If you don't help and you have family back in China, then the parents or the brothers and sisters get a knock on the door from the authorities saying, please work together with us so that we can make money and make China greater. And so it's a tough game.
Yeah. Is the New York Times the only one, or are there publications out there that are actually in your camp? Are they actually trying to get the word out to let people know what's going on?
I would say the mainstream media, even the Wall Street Journal is right of center, and I think they have been very restrained in what they've said. I think it's very hard for mainstream media to talk in the way that I'm speaking. They lose advertisers. Major companies support them with advertising. It's easy to be accused of being racist in this environment. And frankly, many of them just don't have the expertise, the depth of knowledge. People who have studied Chinese, who've lived in China as I have, and who understand. Here's a very simple point: is ideology. Ideology is incredibly important in understanding what's going on. I mean, we have our own differences ideologically in this country, but Xi Jinping represents a clean break with what we saw for 30 years under Deng Xiaoping, Jiang Zemin, and Hu Jintao. Those communist leaders believed in allowing the party to take a step back from controlling the whole economy and the whole society. They allowed a certain pluralism to develop. They had NGOs who were going into China to help with environmental issues or women's issues. They had courts and lawyers who were defending dissidents from charges that they were undermining the government. They had private enterprise. It was really quite amazing to see raw capitalism in China in companies like Jack Ma's and others, technology companies, Xiaomi, other companies like that. So when Xi Jinping took power, he took control of the Communist Party in 2012, became president of the country in 2013. He looked around in horror and thought that all these guys had made terrible mistakes because they had allowed the Communist Party to lose its grip. He believes in the centrality of the Communist Party. The Communist Party has to be at the center. So he has eaten the state. The Communist Party has eaten the state, meaning that they have subdued any independent decision-making in the government. They have eaten the private sector. They have created a totalitarian society under our eyes, and they're trying to extend that totalitarian control around the world because of the ideology. It's what they believe should happen.
And maybe we can kind of get into this in a little bit, just kind of what's going on down with the Panama Canal and China's influence down there. And quite frankly, China's influence all over the world, South Africa or South America, Africa. I mean, they're going gangbusters now.
They have a global view of what they're trying to do. They talk about the China dream. The China dream refers to an era in which China was the supreme power in the world.
Yeah.
They invented gunpowder. They invented the compass. They had porcelain. And they were a dominant power in the world for a period of time. Huge shipping fleets taking goods certainly all over Asia. So when they talk about the China dream, that's what they're talking about, reestablishing China as a world power.
That's interesting that you mentioned that, because I was about to bring that up. I believe the book is called 1492, and it's a historical novel, I believe it, but it's about the famous Chinese fleet that traveled all over the world. Basically, they were, essentially, having diplomacy pretty much all over the world when Europe was just kind of stuck in their little shell. China was all over the place. And then when that fleet got back, the next emperor in line burned the fleet and said, we're closing the doors.
Yeah,
Nobody's allowed in. Nobody's allowed out. So
talk about ideology.
yeah,
The ideology changed. This is what makes Chinese history so volatile, in part that they can be in one path, and the rest of the world thinks we understand the path they're on, and then they change it abruptly because of leadership change. That's what happened with Xi Jinping. I've heard it called the worst foreign policy mistake of the century, that we did not recognize what this man's ambitions are.
interesting. Well, I guess this is the most obvious next question, and that is the new administration. Do they have a plan in place? Do you know? Do you think it's going to work? What do you think is going to happen over the next few years?
Man, I wish I could answer that one. I can make $1 million. Well, I believe the Biden administration had a strategy that involved working with our allies to attempt to control the flow of advanced semiconductors to China. This was a key area. We had to work with work with Japan and Taiwan, and work with the Germans who make the mirrors and precision equipment they use to make semiconductors. Had to work with the Dutch. ASML is a Dutch company that makes extreme ultraviolet lithography, which makes the most sophisticated chips in the world. So we had an alliance going. We tried to get a grip on the flow of money into Chinese technology companies by American investors. Through the CFIUS, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, we tried to get a grip on Chinese purchases of farmland near military bases.
Yeah.
So we can argue about was it effective or not, but at least it was coherent, and it was showing some signs of being a positive thing. We also had the industrial policy, frankly, to develop our own semiconductor industry, to develop our own electric vehicle industry. I think that's called the Anti-Inflation Act, misnamed, but that's what it was called. So there was a broad strategy in place. Now everything's been thrown up into the air. The current administration is tearing down some of these governmental institutions. This administration doesn't really believe in the value of certain governmental institutions and certain multilateral organizations like AID. So they seem to be much more focused on deal making. So is deal making going to be effective? Can you say to someone like Xi Jinping, "We'll make you a deal that if you stop penetrating our IT systems, and if you stop supporting Iran, we'll buy more bok choy from you. We'll buy more of your minerals or whatever." I don't think any kind of deal can be made that will fundamentally reverse the pattern of, frankly, of aggression that we see coming from China. So, and one of the first steps was imposing 25% tariffs on goods coming from China. Right. The Chinese have seen that coming. They've already got set by setting up factories in Vietnam and Mexico, other places where they will route things to those other destinations, and as well as owning things in the United States. So the accrued instrument like tariffs, I don't think will be effective. It certainly won't stop their penetration of our IT systems and our computers and our phones. So I'm afraid that this administration has a significant learning curve to go up. And in fact, the fact that the big tech billionaires are involved in this government is an item of concern, because the big tech billionaires have made a lot of money in China, and someone like Bill Gates and Microsoft helped the Chinese build their computer industry. Right. Apple it makes all their phones in China. Google and Facebook, Meta, make a lot of money from advertisements on their platforms coming from China. They don't want to see any kind of fundamental disruption in the relationship because they're making money. And so as long as you have that many tech billionaires in the picture, that complicates the equation.
Yeah, and then you throw in the relationship with things like the NBA and that sort of thing. It's just China's got their hooks in quite a bit of the United States. Just in reference to the big telecom systems and the issues. You had sent an email over a couple of days ago for a kind of pre-production prep here. You were talking about, you mentioned in your email, you said the new administration doesn't seem to understand what TikTok is all about. And DeepSeek appears to be another Chinese algorithm that processes user data in China or in Chinese hands somewhere.
It turns out that the data that DeepSeek processes can be seen by ByteDance, the same company that owns TikTok. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, let's just talk about TikTok first, and then DeepSeek. Yeah. TikTok is one of the most clever, pernicious, dangerous weapons ever created in history. Period. Full stop.
Wow.
I mean, they have addicted 170 million Americans to it. 170 million Americans would lay down in front of a freight train to save their TikTok accounts. And because the algorithms are so seductive, the algorithms can look at your face and see how you're reacting to a video. They have biometric. Yeah. Oh, yeah. But they can see your face, biometric. And the Chinese are masters of facial recognition technology, and that includes emotional analysis.
Wow.
So then they ping you once an hour. They know where you are, basically. They have access to all your emails, all your apps, and anything else on your phone is open knowledge to them. So if you were the Chinese government are trying to figure out a route to penetrate, get to a key scientist, what better way than find what 3 of his children are saying on TikTok about the family and about stresses and strains in the family. Of course, the Chinese also have had access to so much personal information because of the theft of 22 million files from the Office of Personnel Management in the year 2014 and 15. They've gotten from Equifax, I think it was 120 million Americans had their financial information stolen from Equifax. They stole the Starwood unit of Marriott hotels was penetrated. Anthem Healthcare was penetrated. So they almost certainly can draw a portrait of who Brian is by putting together your health records with your financial records, your travel preferences, your children, what they're saying on TikTok. And then they can create a profile, a portrait of you, and find what approach might be most effective in suborning you and getting you to reveal information, or persuading you to go to China to reveal information and receive money for it. It's staggering how deeply penetrated we have been. Just recently, a senior economist at the Federal Reserve was arrested for leaking sensitive information from our Federal Reserve to 2 people in China who posed as students, so that the Chinese had some access into the decision making going on inside our Federal Reserve. And so, isn't that incredible? I mean,
it's when you talk about that, it's actually scary. And what's even crazier is I have friends who basically are like, hey, listen, they already know everything about us anyway. What's almost like, what's the big deal? It's a very fatalist sort of view of it. Okay, so they know everything about us. What is the end state with that? Is it manipulation to promote China? What do you think the end state is?
Well, it's a subtle long-term game. One is to confuse us about issues like Tibet and Taiwan and Hong Kong. And that's one use of TikTok, is that it spreads information. Many Americans get their so-called news feeds on TikTok. Yeah. So imagine that. Imagine that TikTok, what it must say about the Taiwan president and whether he is a troublemaker or whether he's a peacemaker. Yeah. It's called cognitive warfare. You can confuse people so thoroughly that let's say one day there's an incident in the South China Sea, and the Chinese put out the word on all our social media that the Americans were the aggressors. The American Navy was off the chain. They went crazy. And we Chinese were trying to defend ourselves. Would they have the power to persuade a significant number of Americans that the American military we're the ones making the troubles, not them, not their ambitions for controlling part of the world that is not theirs. So that's one piece of it. Another piece of it is to continue dividing us. I think this is one of the central strategies we see in democracies all over the world. Is that you see it in Canada, South Korea right now? They're in a terrible mess. In Britain and here, that Putin and Xi Jinping have figured out that if you can feed the airwaves, the social media airwaves, with enough sharply different content, have the people here shouting to people over here, and if you can get that to be so intense and so emotional that all trust evaporates, and if they cannot agree on how to defend their democracies, then you've won. That's you have destroyed them from inside.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's the goal is conquest, and it doesn't necessarily have to be military conquest. It could be cognitive warfare, confusion, crippling of our ability to respond, co-opting of our elites. So it's a time-worn strategy.
Yeah.
Chinese have 5,000 years of written history. They've seen almost every form of conflict imaginable. So I think that they want to prevail without having a military conflict. You hear in the foreign policy crowd talking, oh, we don't want to have World War III. Let's avoid World War III. That may be part of the fear at the New York Times. They don't want to see a World War III. So in that view, it's a kinetic war. It's a shooting war between us and them. But the Chinese, if you read The Art of War, written 2,500 years ago by Sun Tzu, one of his sentences struck home with me, and Chinese students can recite this word for word. The supreme art of war is to win without fighting.
Yep.
So imagine if you're Xi Jinping looking at your adversaries and realizing that the American military possesses awesome destructive capability, missiles, nuclear submarines hidden here and there. I mean, if you unleash the power of the American military, you have no assurances about prevailing, I don't think. So it's far better to undermine it from within than it is to engage in direct confrontation.
And that's actually fascinating because of all of the military maneuvers that they've been doing in the South China Sea. It's almost like that's a distraction, and they know it. You know it, and it's interesting because I've talked to naval experts, and they always bring this up. They're like, listen, it would be relatively quick if something were to happen in the South China Sea, say to like the Spratly Islands or something in Taiwan. Those are all stationary targets for our military. So it's almost like they're rattling their sabers, kind of look this way, while they are just coming right in through the back door, both into our cyber infrastructure, as well as this. What kind of warfare did you call it? Psychological,
cognitive warfare. Yeah.
Is that? Do you think the Chinese would get into a shooting war, or do you think they don't? They've got a pretty good handle on this other direction.
I think they would not start it, certainly.
Okay.
I think a lot of the missile silos being built and the nuclear capability that Xi Jinping is seeking, the launching of the aircraft carriers, they stole the technology for the Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier class, and just are starting to launch aircraft carriers. The Fujian was the first one of them. I think they want to have a solid military capability in case we start something, and so I don't think that they. I mean, think how suicidal it would be.
Yeah.
I mean, you have 1.4 billion people. You need to import food. You need to import fuel. I mean, if you started a war, I mean, hundreds of millions of people could die. And so, I mean, I think it's just inconceivable that they would start a shooting war with us.
And I know that I asked you guys this a year and a half ago when we talked, but how can we as individuals defend ourselves aside from shutting off everything and going back to writing letters, handwritten letters type of thing. I mean, is there anything that we can do? Because it almost seems like we are so far down the road to be able to defend ourselves.
Well, for example, Americans are buying millions of packages a day from China. Under the so-called de minimis rule, any package under $800 in value can be shipped from China or Hong Kong directly to somebody in the United States or Mexico. So why are Americans doing that? Well, they're flocking to Shine and Temu. These are two retailers who offer very fashionable clothing at a very low price, almost certainly involving labor by the Uyghur people in the western Xinjiang province. They almost certainly offer those prices. They are not paying living wages to Chinese people. So Americans are enthusiastically buying packages from these companies, and that's a major source of wealth for the Chinese. But the other thing that's coming in are the precursors for fentanyl. We are allowing fentanyl precursors to be shipped into the United States, where some of them slip across the border into Mexico, where they're assembled, so to speak, into fentanyl. Other precursors go to directly to Mexico. Reuters did a blockbuster takeout on this. They were able to set up dummy mailboxes and apartments and buy fentanyl from China. They go online and buy it using Bitcoin, and they even were able to buy the equipment to put the chemicals together to create the final product. We have not taken basic steps to secure our border coming in from China. I mean, we're worried. Everybody's worried about people coming from Mexico, but the volume of stuff coming in from China every day is staggering. So if people would stop buying things from Shine and Temu, and the other thing I say to people when I'm asked this question is, when you go to the store and you pick up something and it says made in China, is there something nearby that says made in Thailand or made in America or made in another country? I mean, that would have huge power. Of course, if you go to a Walmart or Home Depot these days, I mean, I don't know what the number is, 70 or 80% of the stuff in there is made in China. So, or Dollar General, it's even worse. So, the other thing aside from buying patterns is uh, how you handle your devices and how you mix your personal devices with your corporate devices. The pandemic essentially destroyed the ability of companies to maintain a perimeter around their corporate systems, if in fact it was possible before the pandemic, because people insisted on logging into the corporate systems from home or using their personal devices to access the corporate systems. So, and if you have your personal phone and you don't have two-factor authentication, it's a dead cinch to crack your phone or crack your home computer. So that opens up the doors into whatever institution you work with, whether it's a university or a company or a government department. So Americans don't take cybersecurity very seriously. It's astonishing in some levels. In other levels, it's easy to understand why. What me worry? Why should I worry about cybersecurity? Privacy is another thing that we've given up. Privacy. We reveal our secrets, our information to our tech giants, and they give us free access to services. But they then market our personal data. It goes to data brokers. Data brokers sell it to anybody who wants it. So we have made ourselves a soft and easy target by giving away our data, by buying Chinese goods, by not maintaining proper hygiene around our devices. These are the kinds of things that we as individuals could do.
Gotcha. And what, just kind of switching gears here a little bit, what is, what is the concern, or what should be the concern with new technologies like DeepSeek and that sort of thing? What are they doing there?
Well, it turns out that DeepSeek it was launched with a lot of hoopla, a lot of promotion from the Chinese state media. They wanted to make a big splash, so and a lot has been said about this. I'll just make a number of points. I've not come to a final conclusion about it yet, but one point is it's inherently flawed because it's filled with Chinese propaganda. If you ask it, what happened at Tiananmen Square in June 4th, 1989, it'll say, I'm sorry, I cannot respond to that question.
Wow.
Yeah. Who is the rightful owner of the island of Taiwan? The People's Republic of China is the rightful owner. It'll come back and tell you.
Yeah.
So it's filled with propaganda. So it's inherently flawed. Point two, it was built with NVIDIA semiconductors. NVIDIA is an American company. How can we, in God's name, can we justify having, I think they had 10,000 NVIDIA semiconductors in their system. So, I mean, we have to get a better grip on our private sector. I mean, a lot of our problems boil down to the fact that our government and private sector won't work together in pursuit of national security. They have different interests and they fight to defend their interests. So they won't cooperate on something like semiconductors sales into China. A third takeaway on NVIDIA, disinformation. It may have stolen information from OpenAI. It may be, fake. And finally, the data that people enter there is processed by, guess who? ByteDance, the same company that owns TikTok. So in some senses, it could be, I don't have seen proof, but it could be another Trojan horse, another mechanism that gets Americans excited to get on it. People download it, start trying to use it, and start revealing things about themselves to ByteDance and therefore to the Chinese Communist Party. So it's a very complex subject, and I can make those points. I don't know what I don't know. Does it really represent a leap in AI capability for China over what we possess? Our guys are trying to build huge AI data processing centers and using brute force. Which way is better? I can't answer that. So that's one of the hottest debates on Wall Street and in the software and AI community is, have we made a mistake in trying to spend, our big tech companies are spending 65, 70, 80 billion dollars this year. And so all these announcements from Meta, Google, Microsoft. So they're trying to use big muscle to create AI. So did the Chinese do something smarter for less money? I don't know what the final answer is to that, but that's what's had the financial markets all had their knickers in a twist there for a while.
So did our government and our intelligence agencies, did we just miss this ramp up? I mean, because it sounds like they've got some unbelievably intelligent people over there working in China working on this stuff. Did we just not anticipate that, or did we just think it wasn't a big deal?
We've been sort of sleepwalking. I mean, Microsoft helped set up AI leadership academies, and Microsoft helped train a whole generation of AI leadership. Another thing to ask about is OpenAI. And some of the AI systems are open source, meaning anybody can use them. So is that smart? I mean, is it smart for us to be creating AI products and capabilities that we then send out into the ecosystem that the Chinese can get? Is that smart? I mean, we have there's a big meeting going on in Paris as we speak about AI. I mean, can we develop AI in an open environment where many people have access to the tools, or do we need to do it in a more closed environment where the Chinese can't see what we're doing and can't steal it, can't borrow it? So that's a huge debate, and it's beyond my pay grade. I wish I could give you a simple answer.
Yeah, is that meeting that's taking place in Paris? Is that the private sector, or is that governments talking about that?
Well, I just know that our Vice President, J.D. Vance, is there.
Okay.
I would guess it has to be private sector and public sector together. To get anything done, you'd have to have both sets of people at the table, governments and companies.
And in your view, and it doesn't sound like it sounds like the answer is probably no, but in your view, is our government doing anything to set something up like that where there's a public private sort of, you know, brain trust that's going to help us moving forward, or are they not?
Well, there was an announcement about $400 or $500 billion AI center. Open AI is involved, and so is Masayoshi Son of Japan, and Oracle are involved. And so that has the whiff of a public-private partnership. We'll see if that gets off the ground or not, but it's a grandiose scheme. But things are going on in the background with cyber crypto, cyber. The Trump family is involved in some of that. They're launching cyber coins, selling cyber coins to the public. So who knows whether we'll take rational steps to develop AI or whether we will blow it. I mean, it's still wide open.
Are you optimistic, pessimistic about the immediate future? What's your outlook?
Well, I can't say that I'm optimistic. I think that there are huge issues that we're not dealing with, and that in fact we're busy fighting a kind of civil war among ourselves. That if somebody takes over the Pentagon and says that DEI is the major issue, and that we're going to have to get rid of that, the major issue for the Pentagon is can you defend us in the world? Can you project power in the world? That's the major issue. Is your technology up to speed? Is your technology, modernized, fully modernized? Those are the issues. That's what you want a Pentagon to do. So some people have been appointed to positions where they're fighting culture wars, not trying to strengthen those institutions to do America's bidding in the world, to build a stronger democracy. So I think that there are some misguided things are happening.
What are you working on now? You got any books in the works? You got publications in the works? What's going on right now?
Well, my agent says that there's no more market for any more books like this. So I'm biding my time. I'm doing some public speaking. I'm very active with the Overseas Press Club and the Overseas Press Club Foundation, trying to create new generations of correspondents to go out into the world. So I'm playing the long game. I'm trying to hang in, stay alive, and help a new generation develop.
How's the as it pertains to cybersecurity? How's the rest of the world doing?
Ironically, the Taiwanese have done the only ones who have done what I think is a sensible thing. Because they're in the eye of Chinese cyber attacks.
Right.
They have massive tens of thousands of attempted penetrations hit Taiwan every year. And so I interviewed the head of their cyber arm. So they have created a single agency that monitors all government digital systems, all government computer systems and communication systems are now under the watchful eyes of a single digital department. And that's what you have to do if you're going to stand up and defend yourselves against, being penetrated. Yeah. We, unfortunately, have so many different government agencies involved. We have not been able to create a coherent digital czar in the White House. For example, we tried to do that. We had Ann Nuremberg at the National Security Council, Jan Easterly at the Cyber Security and Infrastructure Security Agency within the Department of Homeland Security. We tried to create a triumvirate, but it didn't really work, and it hasn't worked. They're more competitive than they are cooperative. So our intelligence agencies don't necessarily share threat information with each other. we need our government was not constructed for this era of digital warfare, and in the current environment, it's hard to see how it's going to be reorganized to do that. So I'd say the world's democracies all have the problem of being penetrated, of having one side being played against the other side. Elsewhere, you see the authoritarian regimes are many of them are falling apart too. I mean, there's huge change rippling through the world right now, and not much of it is very positive.
Well, I guess the one potential positive about that is maybe there's not much of an appetite to have a kinetic war. So maybe that's a good thing. But
Yeah.
like you said, they don't need to. They could rip us apart at the seams from the inside. And it's unfortunate that I don't think people really understand the gravity of it.
Well, one source of hope is that you and I can have this conversation,
Yeah.
and that people will watch, and we might persuade 10 or 20%. So the game is not over. And one thing that the United States has proven over the years in reaction to Pearl Harbor or Sputnik or 9/11 is that if we can pull ourselves together,
Yeah.
we have enormous capabilities that no other nation can match. So it's a question of how do we organize ourselves? How do we educate ourselves? How do we come together? I'm not going to sing Kumbaya or
Right.
pass around hot cocoa, but there is a possibility that we can gradually coalesce.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see because yes, all those things that you mentioned had kind of one thing in common. That was there was some kind of a physical attack against the United States, which caused us all to come together and repel that or defend against it. Is a cyber attack on one of our main infrastructures, would that be enough, do you think, to bring people together?
Well, we might not be able to pin down who did it, because if the code is hidden deep inside a computer and the computer suddenly goes haywire, who did it? We might find it very hard to what's the clinical word to it? Find attribution for it to identify and confirm who the source was.
Yeah.
So our adversaries have studied American history, and they know that they know about Pearl Harbor, and they know about Sputnik, and they know about 9/11. I think very consciously they want to resist giving us a sudden bang, a sudden wake up call. I think that's part of the strategy, is to slowly erode, slowly bring about negative consequences gradually over time in ways that we can't necessarily see.
Yeah, boiling the frog, it just keeps going slowly, and then all of a sudden you open up the door one day and it's right in front of your face, fully ready to go. It is definitely, and I'm glad that there is some optimism out there, and I just hope that, and I tell people all the time with my podcast is get your information from as many sources as possible, because there are bad actors out there that are actively trying to confuse people. And so if you're only getting it from one source, you're probably not being told the truth. You're probably not getting all the information. So I tell people as much as you can, and maybe in some small way that'll help counteract those bad actors that are actively trying to divide us. And
I agree. I mean, we should teach this in schools.
Yeah.
Along with civics and English, we should teach kids how to know what's real and not real on social media and real media. Who can they trust?
Yeah.
Who's real and not real? And how do they compare and contrast what they're hearing from one organization and then another, and say, well, both of them can't be telling the truth.
Right.
How do we make up our minds about what's accurate? So we're not teaching those skills, and the population as a whole, I think, is easily swayed by an Alex Jones or Steve Bannon, who says just absolutely crazy stuff. and yet people flock to it. It's a mystery to me as someone's been in the news business my entire life.
All right. Well, listen, I accomplished what I wanted to, but I also got myself a little bit nervous about how things are going out there. Let's finish off on a positive note here. So if you could tell somebody, and I guess when you talk to people, when you're out doing your public speaking, how do you end your conversations with these people?
Well, I much like I've said to you, that I plead for them to take small steps in their lives, individual lives. And the point about information quality is another thing I say to people. Please take it seriously. Take it seriously. Where you get your information shapes how you think, shapes how you act. Information is incredibly important, and I try to build bridges. And I think that's I call myself a radical centrist, and I try to find other people who can speak to a range of different issues and a range of different people with different belief systems, and try to bring them to common ground. So that's the hopeful note I usually end on.
Yeah. Well, let's hope people start to kind of open their eyes to the adversary that is out there, and just kind of be more aware of their surroundings, I guess is probably the best way to put that.
Right.
Well, listen, Bill, as usual, this was great. Really enjoyed it. You're a treasure trove of information about cybersecurity and what's going on in the world. So I really appreciate your time. All right, guys, this is the Rain Man. Thanks for watching. Talk to you soon. Thanks for watching Rain Man's Take, observations on the world we live in. If you like the content, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. You can also follow Rain Man's Take on Instagram at Rain Man's Take. Also, check out our website at www.rainmanstakepodcast.com and send your comments to rainmanstake@gmail.com. Keep an eye out for future podcasts, which will be coming out every Thursday at 5 p.m. West Coast time.